One reason why I'm here is that I head up an accrediting agency, and we are often seen as the problem and the block. And in many cases we are, and the we is a collective we. So I'd like to, there is something called the triad. Federal government, state government, and accrediting agencies that are in place. And I think we need to be aware of what are the regulatory challenges that we face. And the reason that I'm here and that 7 of my 25 commissioners are here is we'd like to change. We need help to change. But I used to be 6'4". And if you got a sense of the regulatory environment that we operate in and the constraints on us, frankly, we need your help to figure out how we're going to do what we need to do with quality. We have the greatest diversity of institutional types in the world, long considered the best system that's being challenged today. The idea of a board of trustee, community colleges, proprietary education, open access, all launched here, particularly community colleges. And since the Korean War, we opened the whole concept of access. What's really important is there are so many different types of institutions. When we think of the Ivies, the University of California, Caltech, and the like, there's an extraordinary research mission. Most students, however, are in comprehensive public universities, which I'll show. Very small number relative to the large population of liberal arts colleges, Pomona, Wesleyan, Williams Amherst, and the like, Bennington. An increasing number of faith-based institutions, single eye, single purpose. We accredit schools of psychology, chiropractic colleges. Cedars of Sinai has PhD programs in cancer research and a whole range of programs. What's clear about this is one solution doesn't seem to fit every institution. I wish the federal government would understand that. There are 4,300 accredited institutions. You can see the range. Most are publicly funded institutions and private nonprofit institutions. And if you look down private for-profit institutions, 453, that number is growing, as I'll describe. Where are the students? There are 18 million students in these institutions. 75%, 74% are in publicly funded institutions. And when you see private institutions, 24%, 81% of all freshmen go to institutions within their home states. Okay, growth over a 10-year period. Largely this is a scale issue. The main thing I want to point out is the growth of the for-profit sector, 285%. The growth of distance education, fall 2008, 2 million students, that's growing quite rapidly. And people I talk to, that's where the largest profit center is in higher education. You don't have the fixed costs. 9% of the students today are in proprietary institutions, but they control 42% of the online market. Now, in traditional higher education, these are core concepts. Academic freedom. When a faculty member teaches in a class, I get to teach what I want to teach. We just heard that from Sean. I get to teach what is important to me. The idea is my class doesn't become our program. But I would just say that academic freedom is a core concept, and this country wouldn't be where it is, and that's a key value about the ability of dissent and critical commentary and the like to occur in our academic institutions. There is a challenge about whether that can occur without tenure. Some would say it can't even occur with tenure, but the issue is when you lose tenure and people are on annual contracts and the like, can they stand up and talk about or engage in research or teach classes that are highly controversial? Institutional autonomy is fundamental. Even within state systems, take the California State University system, 23 campuses, each is different. And accredited and offered in one campus may not be accepted in another. Shared governance. The whole idea that faculty control the curriculum is a core value which can be seen as a barrier to innovation. Some of the shifts that we've been talking about at this time is what I would call the deinstitutionalization of learning. And as we've been talking about, it can occur anywhere, but from a student standpoint, the modal student today works 20 hours and attends more than one institution, and at the undergraduate level is a woman and there is a decreasing population of men attending. We are seeing an increase in what I call national footprint institutions. There is not the huge growth in state universities anymore, particularly with reduced federal and state funding, but we are seeing is the growth of University of Phoenix, Capella, Walden, Argosy, and other institutions like that. The largest number of students who are taking online activities actually are inside institutions, existing institutions. Close to 40% of all students are actually taking courses as part of their campus-based programs. I think we will see over the future a lot more interinstitutional arrangements, and there is enormous pressure for increased accountability, which I'll describe. The external regulatory environment is states, federal government, and accreditation, and it's quite extraordinary how much there is. I think it's also important to note that internally, systems, the community college districts may have controls on certain kinds of programs that can be offered, and faculty senates, as part of shared governance, can be seen as an enormous barrier to changes in modality as well as new programs. Now, let's talk about the states, because they're often left out of the equation. 50 different regulatory frameworks. And anyone who offers distance education knows each state has a different definition of what is a presence in that state. So we accredit like Fielding Institute, graduate university, whatever it's called these days, but Fielding now has to get approval in certain states even though it's an external online program. Many states require prior approval of new campuses, new sites, new programs, public and private. New York Board of Regents does that. Some do it only for public institutions, some, in California, for example, private institutions. Accreditation, we're often the bad guys, and I'd like to distinguish where the real bad guys are. Not us, but there's regional, national, religious that accredit at the institutional level. If you can believe it, there are 3 Christian accreditors that accredit Protestant institutions, really. But the regional accreditors, well, I'll come to that, specialized are law, medicine, computer science, radiotherapy, and the like. There are over 60 that are recognized by the federal government. Now, accreditation is something that was created by institutions before the federal government got involved, before there was federal financial aid. We are fiercely non-governmental, and we do not receive any state or public funds, and we operate collaboratively with our institutions. Our institutions appoint our commissioners and fund us. It's a peer review process. The belief is that peer reviewers are the best able to determine what is high quality and in a self-regulatory way. The challenge is how many people believe that occurs with doctors, with lawyers, and the question is, can this be done in education? And will we make the changes through this peer review process that are needed? Accreditation is individual, institution by institution. We don't share the information about what occurs in one institution or another. Our transparency is close to as opaque as as you might think, and I think that's a huge issue we need to face. We try to accredit each institution based on its mission, as if mission differentiation makes a huge difference in terms of quality and outcomes. We have minimum standards. We focus on improvement. When we go to Stanford, which we actually are doing, UCLA and others, we have to go beyond minimum standards. And we talk about, are there systems of improvement? But what should we focus on when we go to those institutions versus a new institution? And those are challenges that we always face. And as you'll see, that accountability has become an increasingly significant part of our function. There are 6 regional accrediting there are 6 regions, and WASC is the only one that has 2 commissions, one for community colleges, one for senior colleges. The smallest accredits 140 institutions, the largest about 1,080. In 1952, we became linked to federal financial aid. So in other words, no student can get financial aid from the federal government in this country without being accredited by one of these Department of Education recognized accrediting processes. It used to be, it was a pro forma process to be linked, and we were called a reliable authority on institutional quality. Today, there are 10 standards that we have to have for every institution that we accredit, and 75 pages of regulation, and in 2 weeks, I'm dealing with 14 more. I've been in 3 negotiated rulemakings in the last 2 years. The regulations keep on coming because the concern is over $80 billion in financial aid. How many of you had a clear card when you traveled? Know what happened to it? Overnight, they closed up. If that were to happen in higher education, the federal government would be on our back. We have to make sure that an institution won't close up. Where do students get their records? And what's going to happen to all their credit? What's going to happen to all their money? So part of this whole point of regulation is following the money and making sure that we're assuring that institutions have the capacity to sustain, so that 50% failure factor is really hard in this kind of regulatory environment. Let me talk about some of the key regulatory issues we face. Transfer of credit. Congress passed a law that allowed that each institution should define for itself what credit is transferable. The Department of Education cannot regulate on that. We are required to have standards on student academic achievement. That is defined as completion rates, placement rates, and learning outcomes. And all of us are putting a tremendous amount of attention on learning outcomes. There is a new regulation that if an institution grows substantially, we have to monitor it. No definition of what is efficient growth, and we have to come up with procedures for do that. A new regulation that we have to monitor institutions' financial capacity and periodically monitor their quality within a 5 to 10, more frequently than a 5 to 10 year cycle. There are federal rules that require that we approve in advance all changes in modality of learning, all changes in control, all changes in ownership. I feel like I'm wearing a badge of federal government much of the time. There is a new set of regulations that distinguishes between correspondence and distance education. There are new definitions of that. No financial aid for correspondence. There is financial education for distance education. In 2 weeks, I'm going to negotiate among a group of people on the definition of a credit hour, defined as 1 hour in class, 2 hours out of class, seat time based. Equivalencies based on outcomes. The department is extremely concerned about federal financial aid money going for credit awards that are not justifiable, that are too accelerated or the like. And this is the world in which we live. There is, for vocational education, only federal financial aid will go to occupations where there is a Department of Education labor code. No new fields. I mean, there has to be a minimum specific number of placement. I'm an attorney who is operating out of the world of law anymore. I set up a law school years ago and was a law professor. Am I a failure? I didn't get placed in the right place. But I'm just saying these are the kinds of data that we're required to deal with. So I just want to say this, first of all, this regulatory environment is one that we must implement. And the question is, how do we transcend that to support the kind of changes that are being talked about here? I think that the model that Tara presented, the idea of deinstitutionalized learning, the swirl of students, we're going to have to learn. But I have to tell you, we live in a regulatory environment that makes our desire to do that a challenge. For a new institution, it takes 4 to 7 years to get accredited. That's the reality. There are 3 stages: eligibility, candidacy. For proprietary institutions, you can't get financial aid until accreditation. National accreditation, there are some that are for more vocational schools, 1 to 2 years, but they don't have the same recognition in the world of higher ed by many employers as regional accreditation. We are considered the gold standard for whatever that's worth. Change of control is where the time is shorter, which is why that's where the money is going and where the change is going. It takes 6 months to a year. And so what we're seeing are a lot of acquisitions and a lot of mergers. And we're seeing a lot of affiliations. of nonprofit, profit, and the like, of how can we, accredited institutions, work with non-accredited entities. And just finally with a word about WASC, because we are trying to make this change, and the reason, as I said, to have commissioners here is, how would we do it? What should we do? So we accredit 160 institutions. We're trying to be an incubator for change. We've really changed our process to focus on outcomes. We have a multi-stage learning model. We're trying to change it from compliance to collaborative inquiry and to build capacity within our institutions. And what we are now going to face as we redefine our standards, all of our standards have to be reviewed and approved by the U.S. Department of Education. It's a laborious process, and it took us many stages to get our innovative model approved. What should be the standards for quality for the next decade? These are questions we have to ask. What are should there be common outcomes for a baccalaureate degree? Should we be evaluating them? What is good enough? When 36% graduate in 6 years, should the institution be on sanction? Should we allow it? What should we do with it? 12% at a community college. How do we encourage innovation and then regulate it, evaluate it? Can we move to the model that Tara talked about, which I think is very exciting? I don't know, because we're focused on institutions, and that's the way the federal government defines our role, even though we're non-governmental. Can we start accrediting programs, even aggregation models? And can we model and be an open source, transparent accrediting agency? And we need your help to do that. So let me just close with Einstein's quote, "Problems we have can't be solved at the same level of thinking as the ones in which we ourselves created." So I really look forward to your help, your questions, but we got to move beyond accreditation being a problem as a way of saying, how are we going to work together to make these changes happen?